Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa ahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah and bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to this reading session that I want to start in Ramadan, and it being the first day of Ramadan. What I'd love to do is to start with having a look at some Mufassirs. Every week I would like to look at one of the Mufassirs so that we are familiar with when we are reading the Quran, whichever translation we are doing, whichever modern day translation we are taking, and so on. But let's look at how tafsirs were developed and how they were, not even how they were, but let's just look at some figures and some names that we can get familiar with. And one of the earliest ones is Imam Tabari, whose full name was Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari, and he was a distinguished 9th century scholar. So he was born in the 800 and something. He was born in 839. That's 2 centuries after our Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if I'm not mistaken. And his monumental work was called Jami' al-Bayan at-Tawil al-Quran, and which was often translated just as Tafsir al-Tabari. So the key point for me here is that in these 2 years after Rasulullah was 200 years after Hijri, is when, you see, up till before that, we had the Sahaba, then we had the Tabain, then the Tabain. So it was still till 3 generations away from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was very close, and there wasn't this need. It was just verbal, maybe, this need to go all the way out and actually compile a whole tafsir book for the understanding, primarily because Islam had spread so far and wide. So the Arabic was no longer maybe the mother tongue, or people didn't understand the nuances of lots of behavioral things, which was immediately understood in the Quran. Coming to us, how much difficulty we have, and then we have to go to listen to the Mufassirs and Tafsir. So that's why I want to just bring up. So Imam Tabari was really one of the first ones who kind of consolidated and brought all of it together. And his lifetime coincided with a very significant period in Islamic history. It was when the Abbasid Caliphate was coming up, and he witnessed many intellectual, political, and social upheavals and developments, for good and bad. So he lived in this transformative phase, and he is sort of like, before that, there was Ibn Abbas. There were others from the time of the Prophet who gave tafsir of the Quran and so on. But he is one of the first who managed to kind of compile everything. So with currents that were ongoing, his tafsir reflects a deep engagement with the social, political, and intellectual challenges of his time. And he tried to be as meticulous as he can be. So his was a comprehensive, meticulous collection of different opinions, offering, a panoramic view of all interpretation. So he really did a very in-depth study. And I haven't read it. It's in Arabic. I haven't had access to an English version. But basically, what he did then allowed future Mufassirs to use his work as an encyclopedia base of valuable resources for future scholars. Okay, so it became a repository of diverse perspectives. And so he did go into the linguistic nuances of the Quran. Why is it said this way? Exploring its beauty, its elegance. The elegance is often translated as ijaz. It's irreplaceable, the language of the Quran, of how it is. And so he did have, and this is again back to the idea of a polymath of our people of those days. They were just in everything. So he was good in Arabic grammar. He was good at the rhetoric of how it is done. And then he meticulously tried to verify all the authentic hadith relating to the interpretation of certain Quranic verses. And so this, in order to increase the reliability of his tafsir work. And beyond linguistic and theological insights, he also took into account historical narrative. So here what he did is to give them a broader perspective of maybe even of when certain ayahs came down, what we call the Asbab al-Nuzul. He went into great depth of that. And then he also looked at the legacy of of what we call the Israeliyats, maybe also, and drawing on what other people had to say on the Quran about it. So many people say that when he took those things, then you have to be a bit careful of how valuable they were or how they were not, because sometimes, because look, everybody can't take an overview of everything. My expertise is only on this. On this, maybe I can do referencing, I can do research, I can look into it in depth. But certain things I will just put in without having had that a cross check and so on. So he was also a historian, and he was he knew a lot of things, but sometimes he just put in everything. And in putting in everything, the sifting of what is significant and what is not so significant, so that the detail becomes a bit overwhelming for the reader. And to extract, key insights, like today the world is all about bullet points. Bullet points is, in 2 minutes, just give it to me and that's it. We don't have time. So the beauty of his detail is that it's there. So if one person wants to only look at a certain aspect of tafsir or certain direction, he will get it there. Whether it's historic, whether it's on the battles, on other things. So you will. But having it all this detail sometimes detracts for the work in modern day. But for us to be, I'm in no position to be thinking of, offering criticism, but because other Mufassirs have, I'm just putting what maybe limits people for wanting to look at it because it was so detailed. The other factor that comes into is sometimes hadith. In hadith, he just put whatever he heard, he put down. So sometimes it was like maybe a weak, unreliable hadith. And why these things only matter for us to know is that it's these kind of areas across the board of our scholars that the Westerners, the Orientalists, that the Islamophobes will pick. But in their book, this is what is said, and look what is said. So that's where we need to at least know, but wait a minute, that's what it was said, but not necessarily, but you say all your scholars are wonderful and, experts in everything. So we do need to have a finer eye in when somebody uses a work of a scholar of the past to criticize us, we need to know about that scholar. We don't immediately say, he was good for nothing. No, that is against the adab of a Muslim to be thinking of anybody in the past, like sometimes we do, we dish the hadith and so on. That's not our tradition. And so, again, the idea, we were all humans. He was, for what he did in his time and the depth of it. Today, now we just go and Google search for this, find the GPS, find your map. Before we used to look up maps. We used to look at the coordinates of where that address is, and we used to do that. Now it's all on the GPS. So similarly, this kind of somewhere in his historical analysis or something, maybe it is not in depth. I want to look at it and I'm not finding it. But never for an instant must we think that we, as Muslims, the adab says that we are never to be dismissive of our scholars, of our alims, of our mufassirs that came so long before us. So inshallah, because it's Ramadan, because inshallah our intention is about connecting with the Quran, of knowing. So when we know about mufassir, we don't just say, that's good for nothing. So why I want to bring up Imam Tabari is that he put so much together, and the future ones, inshallah, I'll talk about to you next week and the week after, do all make reference at some point or the other to Tabari being one of the first, Tafsir Tabari being one of the earliest. And this is already 2 centuries after our Prophet. It's in the year 800s, which is the 9th century, and in the 9th century. and so on. So what it is also, because it was so, he was in this time, we're having enough trouble these days, but even when there was a shift from the Khilafah from the Umayyad to Abbasid, there was a lot of theological and already sectarian biases and some things like that. So invariably, we all live in our society, and sometimes our interpretations align to my school of thought, my way of thinking, and of course, we all tend to give it more notice than something else. So so that's what other Mufassirs after would contend, that maybe sometimes the interpretation was more closely aligned to what his particular theological view was on a certain issue. So inshallah, we'll get into the history and also see what was the historical background of that era of the Abbasid Umayyad. These are all terms we really need to be familiar with, and to know that, after the four rightly guided Khalifa, that there was a period of fitna, then there was the Umayyad, was the Caliphate that continued for so many years. Probably up to 100 years or so. I'm not sure. I'm not getting into that right now. But to know, and then after the Umayyad, it was the Abbasid, and that carried on, and what's called of the golden era of the Muslim learnings and traditions. And we'll go into the history and have a look at that. So. You can say that the basic thing is that he provided a significant contribution to Islamic scholarship. And to get the historical, the contextual background to it. And so I just need you to remember a word. Imam Tabari, his Tafsir Tabari, is one of the earliest and most extensive, comprehensive as can be, attempt to write a tafsir of the Quran, and taking in. So from that long time ago, he knew the importance of the context, he knew the importance of history and all that, and he brought it back in this. So whether we read the whole tafsir or not, know that he's one of the earliest. There were many more also, but the most significant one of a time in our history which was very significant. So with that, I'd like to end off, and I pray just this little glimpse of him will maybe entice you to want to learn more and know that he was one of, and just know that he was one of the earliest Mufassirs in our history of connected with the Quran. So with that, Subhana Rabbika Rabbil Izzati Amma Yasifun, wa Salamun al Mursaleen, walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.